The phone's shrill ring cut through my dreamless sleep at exactly 2:07 a.m. After 15 years in military intelligence, I knew that calls at such hours never brought good news. "Major Chen," I answered, instantly alert despite the hour. "Report to headquarters immediately." Colonel Mann's voice was clipped and tense. "Secure briefing room 3, no uniform necessary." He hung up before I could respond. I dressed quickly in dark civilian clothes, jeans, a gray Henley, and a light jacket that concealed my sidearm. The drive to headquarters took 12 minutes. The night guard barely glanced at my credentials before waving me through, his face illuminated by the pale blue glow of his monitor. The halls were empty except for the occasional night shift analyst hunched over computer screens. My footsteps echoed against the polished floors as I made my way to secure briefing room 3, a windowless box used only for the most sensitive operations. Colonel Mann was waiting, a manila folder and black briefcase on the table before him. His eyes were rimmed red, and the coffee mug beside him appeared to have been refilled multiple times. "Sit down, Chen." He gestured to the chair across from him. "You're being reassigned, effective immediately." I remained silent, waiting for details. In intelligence work, questions only came after absorbing all available information. "You're to escort a civilian scientist, a Dr. Victoria Hobbs, to a location in the Pacific. Coordinates will be provided. You'll have minimal equipment, no support team." Mann pushed the folder toward me. "This is all you need to know about her." I flipped it open, scanning the sparse contents. "Sir, this is highly irregular. Standard protocol for remote field operations requires—" "I know what the protocol requires, Major." Mann cut me off. "These orders come directly from the Joint Chiefs. May I ask about the nature of Dr. Hobbs's work?" "No." The colonel's response was immediate. "Your job is to get her there safely, assist with whatever she requires, and bring her back. Nothing more." I maintained a neutral expression despite my growing concern. "Equipment limitations, sir?" "One standard field pack each. Dr. Hobbs has her own specialized equipment already cleared." Mann slid the black briefcase toward me. "This contains your operational parameters and coordinates. Memorize them. The documents will self-destruct 30 minutes after opening." Self-destructing documents were reserved for the highest classification levels, usually matters of national security that could trigger international incidents if exposed. "You'll also find a satellite phone. Check in every 12 hours, with me only." Mann leaned forward, his voice dropping. "No one else is to know your location or mission parameters. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." I opened the briefcase, immediately noting what wasn't there. Standard authorization codes, proper clearance signatures, documentation of mission objectives. Red flags started waving in my mind. Mann stood, signaling our briefing was concluding. "If you witness anything unusual, Major, document it thoroughly and return immediately." I closed the briefcase. "Defined parameters for unusual, sir?" A flicker of something, hesitation perhaps, crossed Mann's face. "You'll know it when you see it. Departure is 0800 hours from Hickam. Transport to Pearl Harbor leaves in 3 hours." As I rose to leave, Mann added, "Good luck, Chen. Remember your training." I knew then this wasn't a standard operation. Luck was never mentioned in mission briefings. That was for amateurs who didn't prepare properly. Back at my apartment, I opened the briefcase and started memorizing the coordinates, a location in the middle of the Pacific, far from any charted islands or shipping lanes. The documents contained minimal information about the mission itself, only logistics and check-in protocols. 27 minutes later, the papers began to smoke slightly before disintegrating into fine ash that I flushed down the toilet. My military instincts screamed caution. I wrote down the coordinates on a piece of paper, along with a letter to my brother explaining my concerns about the mission's irregular parameters. I sealed both in an envelope and locked it in my personal safe, hoping I was being overly paranoid. With an hour before my transport departed, I packed light, changes of clothes, basic survival gear, and the satellite phone. Everything by the book, even if the book had apparently been thrown out for this mission. The pre-dawn air was cool as I boarded the C-130 bound for Pearl Harbor. 3 other passengers, all military personnel heading for routine assignments, dozed off immediately. I remained awake, reviewing what little I knew about Dr. Victoria Hobbs from the redacted file. PhD in quantum physics from MIT at 24, recruited immediately by a program whose name was blacked out. Publication history ended 6 years ago. What remained unredacted was her clearance level. She had access across multiple classified physics projects despite her civilian status. Even generals rarely receive such comprehensive clearance. Something was fundamentally wrong with this mission. Every procedure violation, every missing signature, every redacted detail pointed to an operation that officially didn't exist. In 15 years of covert operations across the Pacific Rim, I'd never encountered a briefing so deliberately opaque. As the transport rumbled over the California coastline and out over the vast Pacific, I closed the file. Years of military discipline took over, compartmentalizing my concerns. Whatever awaited at those coordinates, I would face it with the same methodical approach that had kept me alive through operations in North Korea, the South China Sea, and a dozen other hotspots too classified to name. The plane's engines droned, a monotonous background to my circling thoughts. Pearl Harbor was still hours away, and beyond that, an unmarked location with a civilian scientist whose work was important enough to break every protocol in the book. I checked my watch and settled back, closing my eyes without actually sleeping. Whatever was waiting in the middle of nowhere, I'd find out soon enough. Pearl Harbor bustled with its usual military efficiency as I stepped off the transport plane. The Hawaiian sun beat down with surprising intensity for the early hour, and the air carried that distinctive mix of jet fuel, sea salt, and tropical vegetation. I shouldered my pack and scanned the tarmac, looking for my contact. A Navy lieutenant approached, clipboard in hand. "Major Chen, your transport is ready. Dr. Hobbs is waiting." He led me to a secluded hangar where a sleek black aircraft waited, not standard military issue, but something more advanced with an aerodynamic design I didn't recognize. Standing beside it was a woman who could only be Dr. Victoria Hobbs. She barely looked up from her tablet when I approached, her fingers flying over complex equations that scrolled across the screen. Auburn hair streaked prematurely with gray was pulled back in a hasty bun, several strands escaping around her face. Wire-rimmed glasses sat on a narrow nose, and behind them, intense green eyes flickered with calculation. "Dr. Hobbs," I said, extending my hand. "David Chen. I'm assigned to—" "Yes, I know who you are, Major." She glanced up briefly, her handshake perfunctory before returning to her work. "We need to leave immediately. The window is optimal right now." "Window for what?" I asked. She ignored the question, instead turning to a crate of equipment. "Help me load these carefully. They're sensitive to vibration." The next 40 minutes passed in a blur of activity as we loaded her equipment. Strange devices with crystalline components and what looked like quantum resonators, though I was no expert. Dr. Hobbs supervised every movement with the intensity of someone handling explosives. A pilot waited at the aircraft, a woman with captain's bars and the name Rollins on her flight suit. She nodded professionally as we boarded. "Coordinates programmed, Doctor," she said. 9-hour flight time, give or take. The interior was sparse but functional, 4 seats and space for equipment. No insignia or identification anywhere. Another protocol violation to add to the growing list. We took off smoothly, the aircraft performing well above standard capabilities. Once we reached cruising altitude, Captain Rollins engaged the autopilot and retreated to the cockpit, leaving me alone with Dr. Hobbs. She immediately unstrapped herself and moved to a case containing what looked like a monitoring device. After setting it up, she began taking readings, muttering numbers under her breath, and occasionally making notations on her tablet. "Are you planning to brief me on this mission at any point, Doctor?" I asked after an hour of watching her work. "You're here for security and assistance," she replied without looking up. "That's all you need to know for now." "With respect, that's not how operations work. I can't secure what I don't understand." She sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "What did Colonel Mann tell you?" "Almost nothing. Escort you to coordinates, assist you, return." I leaned forward. No mission parameters, no clear objectives, no threat assessment. Good. That's how it should be. She returned to her readings. I observed her for another hour. Her hands occasionally trembled when checking certain readings, and twice she cursed under her breath while adjusting settings. Field stability dropping by 0.03, she muttered. That's faster than last month's projections. When she moved to retrieve something from another case, I asked, "What exactly are we looking for at our destination, Dr. Hobbs?" She paused, seeming to debate how much to tell me. "We're going to the disk." "The disk?" "You'll see when we arrive." She returned to her monitoring equipment, effectively ending the conversation. The hours passed slowly. Hobbs alternated between taking readings, making calculations, and occasionally dozing fitfully in her seat. I maintained my vigilance, watching both her and our surroundings from habit. Around hour 7, she became more agitated, checking readings more frequently and making rapid adjustments to her equipment. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "The field is fluctuating more than expected," she said, then caught herself. "Nothing to concern yourself with." "Field?" She ignored me, instead calling to the pilot. "Captain Rollins, what's our ETA?" "Approximately 2 hours, Doctor." Hobbs nodded, visibly relieved. "Fast enough. We'll make it before the next cycle." My military training had taught me to notice patterns, inconsistencies, and nervous behavior. Dr. Hobbs displayed all three in abundance, but without context, I couldn't assess whether her anxiety stemmed from legitimate danger or scientific obsession. As we began our descent 14 hours after I'd first received Colonel Mann's call, Captain Rollins's voice came over the intercom. "Approaching coordinates now. You might want to see this." I moved to the window. Below us spread the vast Pacific, deep blue and endless, except for a perfect circle of land breaking the monotony. It was unmistakably artificial, 2 miles in diameter by my estimation, completely flat and utterly devoid of vegetation. The landmass looked like a massive disk had been placed on the ocean's surface. "Welcome to the disk," Dr. Hobbs said, coming to stand beside me. For the first time since meeting her, I detected something like reverence in her voice. "That's not natural," I stated the obvious. "No, it's not." Her eyes never left the sight below. "Nothing about it is." Captain Rollins expertly brought us down on the barren surface. The landing was smoother than expected, the ground more solid than it appeared from above. As soon as we touched down, Dr. Hobbs was moving, gathering equipment and preparing to disembark. I followed her lead, helping carry several cases of sensitive instruments. The air outside hit me with unexpected force, not in temperature, which was mild, but in stillness. No birds, no insects, no sound except the faint lapping of waves at the distant edge of the disk. The ground beneath my boots felt wrong, perfectly level, and with an unusual texture that wasn't quite rock, sand, or any material I recognized. Hobbs immediately began setting up monitoring stations in a precise pattern around our landing site. I assisted silently, watching as each device powered up with a soft hum and began collecting data. "I was here 6 months ago," she said suddenly, adjusting a sensor. "With a research team, 12 of us. We spent 3 weeks studying it." I waited, letting her continue at her own pace. "This island, if you can call it that, appeared 3 years ago. A commercial satellite captured its image by accident during a routine weather mapping operation." She checked readings on her tablet. "At first, everyone thought it was an equipment malfunction. Islands don't just appear overnight. But this one did." She nodded. "Government satellites were redirected to verify. That's when they detected the radiation patterns." "Dangerous levels?" I asked, my mind immediately going to containment protocols. "Not radiation as you understand it." She gestured for me to follow as she began walking away from the aircraft. "Something more like quantum fluctuations, energy signatures that shouldn't exist in nature." We traversed the surface slowly, each footstep landing with an odd resonance on the too-perfect ground. Despite the barren appearance, nothing about this place felt natural. The horizon formed a perfect circle in every direction, meeting the ocean in a precise line. "What is this place?" I asked, running my hand over the surface. It felt unnaturally smooth, with microscopic patterns that seemed to follow mathematical progressions. "That's what we're still trying to determine." She stopped walking, checking her tablet. My team had divergent theories. Some thought alien, others future human technology. A few suggested something else entirely. And what do you think? She didn't answer, instead moving with purpose toward what looked like an ordinary rock formation, one of the few features breaking the monotony of the disk's surface. Without warning, she approached the formation and pressed her palm against it in a specific pattern, 3 points in sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground beneath us shuddered. A perfect circle, 10 feet in diameter, slid open at our feet, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The engineering was flawless. No seams had been visible moments before, yet now an entrance appeared, as though it had always been there. Dr. Hobbs pulled a high-powered flashlight from her pack and clicked it on, illuminating the first few steps of the staircase. You never answered my question, I said, my hand instinctively moving to my sidearm. What do you think this place is? She stepped onto the first stair, her face illuminated from below by the flashlight, giving her features an otherworldly appearance. I think it's the most important discovery in human history. Without another word, she began descending the spiral staircase, her footsteps echoing against the strange material. I hesitated for only a moment before following her into the darkness. Whatever waited below, I was now committed to seeing it through. The staircase spiraled endlessly into darkness, each step identical to the last. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing only more steps ahead. Dr. Hobbs descended with purpose, her footfalls echoing against the walls. The material surrounding us wasn't stone or metal, but something in between, unnaturally smooth with faint patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. How far down does this go? I asked, my voice bouncing off the perfect curves of the passage. Far enough to be protected from most surface disturbances, Hobbs replied without looking back. Approximately half a mile by our measurements. The air grew cooler as we descended, but not damp as one would expect underground. Instead, it felt precisely regulated, another indication that nothing about this place occurred naturally. My military training kicked in, cataloging details. No dust on the steps, no signs of age or wear, despite Hobbs claiming this structure was ancient. After nearly 20 minutes of continuous descent, my legs began to protest. Just as I was about to request a brief rest, the narrow staircase abruptly ended. We're here, Hobbs announced, stepping off the final stair. My flashlight beam couldn't penetrate the darkness beyond. The space seemed to swallow light completely. Hobbs reached into her pack and removed what looked like a small metal sphere. She twisted it, and suddenly the device emitted a soft blue glow that expanded outward. What it revealed stole my breath away. We stood at the edge of a vast cavern, so large my mind struggled to process its dimensions. The ceiling arched hundreds of feet overhead, while the far walls disappeared into shadow despite the growing illumination. The space dwarfed aircraft hangars, sports stadiums, even natural cave systems I'd seen in briefing photographs. But it was what stood at the center that commanded attention. What the hell is that? I whispered, though my voice still carried in the perfect acoustics of the chamber. That, Hobbs said with unmistakable reverence, is why we're here. Rising from the cavern floor was a structure resembling a stepped pyramid, but with proportions and angles that made my eyes hurt trying to follow them. Certain sections appeared to bend in ways that shouldn't be physically possible. Corners that turned at more or less than 90 degrees, surfaces that seemed both concave and convex simultaneously. The entire structure gleamed with a dull metallic sheen under Hobbs's light source. This way, she said, starting across the smooth cavern floor. As we approached, I noticed the pyramid's surface was covered entirely in intricate carvings. They formed continuous scenes wrapping around each level, depicting elongated humanoid figures interacting with ordinary humans. The humanoids stood nearly twice as tall as the humans beside them, with disproportionately long limbs and enlarged craniums. The caretakers, Hobbs explained, noticing my attention on the carvings. That's what my team called them. Based on our analysis, they constructed this entire facility approximately 50,000 years ago. 50,000? I cut myself off, focusing on the carved scenes. As we walked the perimeter of the first level, I recognized historical periods in sequence. Primitive humans crafting their first tools under the guidance of these caretakers. Then early agriculture, the building of ancient cities, all the way through to what appeared to be modern technology. These carvings tell a story, I said. They show these beings guiding human development. Hobbs nodded. The caretakers appear to have taken a special interest in humanity's evolution, but not just technological evolution. She pointed to a series of carvings showing the elongated beings touching human foreheads, with something like energy flowing between them. Cognitive evolution as well. We continued around the structure to a set of seamless steps on the far side. As we climbed, each level revealed more carvings, more history, more interaction between these beings and humans throughout time. Here, Hobbs said, pausing at a specific carving. It showed a group of caretakers constructing the very pyramid we stood upon. This depicts the creation of what we're calling the machine. At the top level, we reached a rectangular opening that led inside the structure. Hobbs entered without hesitation. I followed, my hand instinctively moving to my sidearm, a reflexive action despite the obvious absence of any conventional threat. The passage opened into a chamber that occupied the pyramid's center. Within it stood what I can only describe as a mechanism of impossible complexity, a massive crystalline device filled with countless components that seemed to shift in and out of visibility as I watched. Some parts appeared solid, while others manifested as translucent energy formations that pulsed with internal light. The entire apparatus gave the impression of something existing partially in another dimension. "What exactly am I looking at?" I asked, unable to keep the awe from my voice. "The most important technology ever created," Hobbs said, approaching a raised platform that faced the device. "This machine maintains the specific quantum field that allows human consciousness to exist and evolve in its current form." Consciousness? You're saying this thing affects human minds? Not affects, enables. Hobbs ran her hand across a console-like formation of crystals. Human consciousness as we know it, our ability to self-reflect, to create, to imagine abstract concepts, requires a stable quantum field to function properly. The caretakers discovered this and built this machine to maintain that stability while humanity developed. I tried to process what she was saying. "You're telling me human consciousness is artificial?" "No. The potential was always there, but like a plant needs the right soil and environmental conditions to grow properly, human consciousness required the right quantum conditions to develop fully." She positioned herself before two crystalline nodes that protruded from the console. "And now I need to show you why we're here." She placed her hands on the nodes. Immediately, the crystalline structure responded. Lines of blue-white energy coursed through the device, illuminating pathways that had been invisible before. The chamber filled with light that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "What are you doing?" I called out, but my voice sounded distant, as though passing through water. "Connecting you to the field directly," Hobbs replied, her voice similarly distorted. "You need to understand." The light intensified until it filled my vision completely. Then, without warning, I wasn't in the chamber anymore. I was everywhere. I was everyone. Visions flooded my consciousness, not like watching a film, but like living countless lives simultaneously. I experienced the first human to create fire, feeling their triumph and fear. I was a woman in ancient Egypt plotting irrigation channels, a Chinese astronomer mapping stars, a medieval blacksmith perfecting his craft. Each experience came with complete emotional context, their hopes, their struggles, their moments of insight. The visions accelerated. I witnessed the Renaissance through the eyes of both masters and common people. I experienced the Industrial Revolution from multiple perspectives across different continents. I felt the horror of wars and the exhilaration of discoveries, each moment connected to the next in a complex web of human development. Then came a shift. The visions took on a different quality, showing me the machine itself through time. I saw the caretakers completing its construction, then departing Earth, after establishing monitoring systems. I witnessed the machine functioning perfectly for millennia, maintaining the quantum field that enabled human consciousness to flourish. But then I saw disturbances in the field, subtle at first, then growing. Parts of the machine began shutting down, compensating, rerouting energy. The visions showed me a timeline, the machine slowly depleting its reserves over thousands of years. I saw calculations, projections, failure points. The message became unmistakable. The machine was failing. With that realization, the visions abruptly terminated. Reality crashed back into my awareness as I found myself collapsed on the chamber floor, my entire body trembling. Sweat soaked my clothes despite the cool air. My mind felt simultaneously expanded and overwhelmed. "What?" I gasped, struggling to form words. "What was that?" Dr. Hobbs knelt beside me, her face showing concern but also understanding. She'd withdrawn her hands from the crystalline nodes, and the machine had returned to its previous state of subdued activity. "That was direct access to the consciousness field the machine maintains," she said quietly, "and now you understand what's at stake." I pushed myself up to a sitting position, my limbs still shaking. "The machine, it's failing." Hobbs nodded, her expression grave. "After 50,000 years of operation, its power source is depleting. Based on current rates of degradation, we estimate less than 5 years before complete failure." The implications of what I'd experienced were still assembling themselves in my mind. If what Hobbs claimed was true, if human consciousness depended on this machine, then its failure would mean... "What happens when it stops working?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer from the visions. "First, subtle changes in human cognitive capabilities, increased irrationality, difficulty with abstract concepts, then as the field deteriorates further." She paused, looking directly at the machine. "Widespread psychosis, societal collapse. Eventually humanity would regress to a pre-conscious state." I stared at the ancient mechanism with its impossible geometry and components that seemed to exist between dimensions. The weight of its purpose and its imminent failure settled on me with crushing force. "Why did you bring me here?" I finally asked. "What can I possibly do about this?" Hobbs stood and offered her hand to help me up. "That's what we need to discuss next, because the situation is far more complicated than just a failing machine." My legs steadied as I rose to my feet, but my mind remained in turmoil. The visions had shown me humanity's entire history, our struggles, our triumphs, our potential, and now I'd learned it was all balanced on the edge of collapse. "I need to know everything," I said.
"Yes," Hobbs agreed, looking back at the machine. "You do. But first, let's return to the surface. What I have to tell you next will require you to make a choice, perhaps the most important choice of your life." I steadied myself against the wall, my legs still unsteady from the overwhelming experience of connecting with the machine. The visions lingered in my mind like traces of a dream, vivid yet fragmented, profound yet hard to fully comprehend. My entire body felt different, as though the boundaries between myself and the rest of humanity had temporarily dissolved. "Let's get to the surface," Dr. Hobbs said, watching me with careful eyes. "You need air and proper light." The climb back up the spiral staircase was arduous. My mind raced with fragmentary images from the visions while my body fought exhaustion. Hobbs led the way, occasionally glancing back to ensure I was managing the ascent. Neither of us spoke during the climb, the only sound our labored breathing echoing against the impossibly smooth walls. When we finally emerged onto the disk's surface, the ordinary blue sky and distant horizon line seemed almost alien after what I'd witnessed below. Captain Rollins stood near the aircraft, running routine maintenance checks. She nodded professionally at our return but asked no questions. "Water?" Hobbs offered, extending a canteen. I took it gratefully, gulping down several mouthfuls before finding my voice. "I need to understand everything now." She gestured toward a flat section of the disk about 50 yards from the aircraft. We walked in silence, each step against the strange surface sending subtle vibrations through my boots. When we reached the spot, she sat down cross-legged on the ground, and I followed suit. You wanted to know everything, she began, her voice steady but tense. So I'll start from the beginning. Approximately 50,000 years ago, the beings we call the caretakers arrived on Earth. What were they? Aliens? Hobbs shook her head. Not in the way you're thinking. The visions showed you glimpses, but the full truth is more complex. They existed partially in our dimension and partially in others. They were drawn to Earth because they detected something unique, the potential for a new kind of consciousness in the primitive hominids that would eventually become humans. She paused, tracing a pattern in the disk's surface with her fingertip. The caretakers had evolved beyond physical form in many ways, but they recognized something special in humanity's potential. Our brains were evolving towards something they found valuable, a particular form of consciousness capable of abstract thought, creativity, and self-awareness. But that evolution wasn't guaranteed, I said, recalling fragments from the visions. Precisely. Human consciousness, as it turns out, requires a stable quantum field to maintain coherence. Without that stability, our minds couldn't develop or maintain the complex neural patterns necessary for higher thought. It would be like trying to build a house of cards in a hurricane. I frowned, trying to process the implications. You're saying human consciousness isn't natural? It's entirely natural in its potential, Hobbs corrected. But its expression required the right conditions. Think of it like plant life. Seeds contain all the genetic information to become trees, but they need the right soil conditions, temperature, and water to thrive. The caretakers discovered that human consciousness needed a specific quantum field to stabilize and flourish. She looked toward the spot where the entrance to the underground chamber had sealed itself shut. So they built this place, this machine, to generate and maintain that field across the entire planet. They programmed it to run for approximately 50,000 years, by which time they calculated humanity would have evolved to the point where the field would be self-sustaining. But that hasn't happened. Hobbs sighed, removing her glasses to rub the bridge of her nose. No, their calculations were off. Human consciousness has evolved, but not enough to maintain stability without the machine's influence. And now the machine is failing. How long?
Less than 5 years before complete failure, based on our most optimistic projections. Her voice was flat, clinical. We've already detected subtle degradation effects in human cognitive patterns worldwide. Increased irrationality, decreased empathy, difficulty with complex abstract thinking. Most people attribute these changes to social media, political polarization, or environmental factors. They don't realize it's the early warning signs of consciousness destabilization. I recalled certain classified intelligence reports I'd seen, unexplained increases in violent conflict, bizarre mass delusions spreading across disparate populations, sudden psychiatric breaks in previously stable individuals. Things that analysts had struggled to explain through conventional sociological models. What happens when it fails completely? Her eyes met mine, unflinching. First, widespread cognitive disruption, mass psychosis, inability to process reality coherently. Then, societal collapse as basic cooperation becomes impossible. Eventually, humans would revert to a pre-conscious state, perhaps maintaining some technological knowledge through muscle memory, but losing the capacity for innovation, abstract thought, or meaningful self-awareness. Extinction. Not necessarily biological extinction, but the extinction of everything that makes us meaningfully human. The weight of this revelation settled on me like a physical force. The machine wasn't just some ancient artifact, it was the foundation that made human civilization possible. You said you were here with a research team before. What happened? Hobbs laughed bitterly. We discovered the truth about the machine 6 months ago. 12 of us, the brightest minds in theoretical physics, consciousness studies, and quantum engineering. We spent 3 weeks studying it, learning its purpose, confirming its importance. Her expression darkened, and then we split on how to respond. Split how? Half the team, led by Dr. Edmund Wayland, believed that humanity should be allowed to evolve naturally from this point forward, without the machine's influence. They argued that continuing to rely on the caretaker's technology was stunting our true developmental potential. She shook her head in obvious disagreement. The other half, my faction, recognized that humanity isn't ready. We need more time with the field in place, perhaps centuries more, before we could maintain consciousness stability on our own. And the government sided with Wayland, I guessed. Yes, the military in particular was uncomfortable with the machine's implications. The idea that some ancient technology has been influencing human minds for 50,000 years triggered their deepest security concerns. They saw it as a threat to human autonomy, despite our explanations that it merely stabilizes what's already natural to us. I processed this information, seeing the full picture start to form. So they're going to destroy it. That's why I'm here, to verify the destruction afterward. Hobbs nodded. A tactical nuclear strike has been authorized. The island will be obliterated in approximately 72 hours. And Colonel Mann selected me specifically for this mission. The pieces clicked into place. My background in covert operations in the Pacific region, my expertise in verification protocols for sensitive targets. I'm supposed to confirm the site's destruction and monitor for any anomalous radiation patterns afterward. Yes, though man doesn't know the full truth, only a select group at the highest levels understands what's really at stake. I stood up abruptly, pacing across the smooth surface of the disk. Everything about my briefing now made sense. The irregular protocols, the minimal information, the strange emphasis on documenting anything unusual. I was never meant to understand what I was helping to destroy. Why did you bring me down there? I demanded. Why show me the visions? Hobbs remained seated, watching me with calm intensity. Because I need your help, Major Chen. I need you to help me save the machine. By doing what exactly? Stopping a nuclear strike? That's treason. By helping me fake its destruction, she replied evenly. I know enough about strike verification protocols to understand they're not perfect. There are ways to make it appear the island was destroyed while preserving the underground structure. I stopped pacing and stared at her. You're asking me to betray my country, my oath as an officer. I'm asking you to save humanity from itself. She rose to her feet, her small frame suddenly seeming more commanding. The visions showed you the truth, Chen. You felt what will happen if the machine fails. This isn't about nationalism or military loyalty. It's about the continued existence of human consciousness itself. She was right. The visions had shown me with absolute clarity what would happen without the machine's stabilizing influence. I had experienced the slow degradation of human thought, the descent into chaos, the loss of everything that made us who we are. It wasn't speculation or theory. I had felt it as truth. What about repowering it? I asked. You said that was your faction's goal. Yes, and I still believe it's possible. The machine was designed with incredible redundancy and self-repair capabilities. If we can buy time, if we can prevent its destruction, I can continue studying it. The caretakers left information encoded in the structure itself. With enough time, I believe I can find a way to extend its operational lifespan. I walked to the edge of the disk, where the perfect circle met the endless blue ocean. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the unnaturally smooth surface. Somewhere out there, plans were being finalized for this site's destruction. Orders were being transmitted, a nuclear weapon was being prepared, all to eliminate something humanity didn't understand but feared. Hours passed as I contemplated the choice before me. Hobbs gave me space, returning to the aircraft to check her equipment. Captain Rollins maintained her professional distance, running pre-flight checks as though this were any ordinary mission. The sun completed its descent, leaving us in darkness broken only by the aircraft's running lights and the brilliant canopy of stars overhead. Finally, I returned to where Hobbs worked inside the aircraft's small cabin. If I help you, I said quietly, there's no going back. I'll be branded a traitor. Everything I've worked for, my entire career, my freedom, it's all gone. She looked up from her calculations, her face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. I know what I'm asking. I wouldn't if there were any alternative. And you're certain? Absolutely certain that humanity needs this machine? As certain as one can be about anything this profound, she replied. The evidence is overwhelming. The machine's degradation patterns correlate perfectly with observed changes in human behavior worldwide. The caretaker's records show previous attempts at disconnection that ended in cognitive collapse. She closed her laptop. I staked my entire career on this conclusion, Chen. I'm willing to be history's villain if it means humanity continues to exist as we know it. I nodded slowly, my decision crystallizing. Then we need a plan. The nuclear strike is coming in less than 3 days. How do we make them believe they destroyed something that's still here? Relief washed over her face. I have some ideas. The machine itself can generate electromagnetic fields far beyond what most sensors can detect. If we can modify the strike parameters and use the machine's capabilities, we might be able to create the appearance of complete destruction. I'd need access to the strike team, the weapon specifications. Colonel Mann will give you that access, she interrupted. Remember, you're here to verify destruction. That means you need to know exactly what's being deployed and how to confirm its effectiveness. She was right. My mission parameters would necessarily include complete information about the strike itself. I would be expected to monitor and verify. We'll need to falsify sensor readings, satellite imagery. I began thinking aloud, my mind racing through the technical challenges. The machine can help with that too, Hobbs explained. It's designed to manipulate quantum fields across vast distances. With the right programming, it can create false readings on even the most sophisticated sensing equipment. We stayed up through the night, Hobbs explaining the machine's capabilities, while I outlined verification protocols and their vulnerabilities. By dawn, a plan had begun to take shape, daring, technically complex, but possibly viable. There's one more thing, Hobbs said as sunlight began to creep across the disk's surface. The machine has defense mechanisms we can trigger, ways to protect itself against exactly this kind of attack. The caretaker's built-in countermeasures against potential threats. I didn't activate them during our first research mission because I was hoping to convince the government peacefully. What kind of countermeasures? Primarily field manipulation capabilities that can disrupt electronics, create sensory illusions, even temporarily affect consciousness at close range. She hesitated. Using them would provide additional protection, but it would also confirm the military's worst fears about the machine's influence over human minds. I considered this, watching the sunrise paint colors across the perfect circle of the disk. We'll keep that as a last resort. The cleaner we can make this operation, the better our chances of maintaining the deception long-term. Hobbs nodded in agreement. I'll start preparing the machine for what's coming. You should rest before you contact Colonel Mann. You'll need to sound completely normal when you report in. As she walked away toward the entrance to the underground chamber, I called after her. Dr. Hobbs, if we succeed, if we manage to save the machine, what then? We'll be trapped here, unable to leave without exposing the truth. She turned back, her small frame silhouetted against the rising sun. Then we become the new caretakers, Major Chen. Someone has to maintain the field until humanity is ready. It might as well be us. I watched her disappear back into the disk, then turned my attention to the coming challenge. In less than 72 hours, a nuclear weapon would be deployed against this site. Somehow, we needed to make the world believe it had succeeded in destroying something that must, at all costs, be preserved. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 15 years of military service dedicated to protecting my country, I was about to commit the ultimate betrayal, all to save the very people who had ordered this destruction. Human consciousness itself hung in the balance. The machine had to survive. Osh, Chapter 15. The submarine's interior felt claustrophobic despite its size. Captain Reynolds led me through narrow corridors lined with pipes and control panels, each step bringing me closer to the weapon that would supposedly destroy the disk. My credentials had granted me access without question, the verification officer doing his job, preparing to document humanity's grave mistake. The W-80 warhead has been modified for this specific application, Reynolds explained, his voice reflecting the practiced indifference of someone who'd been told only what he needed to know. 20 kiloton yield, optimized for subsurface penetration to ensure complete destruction of the target. I nodded, my expression neutral despite the thundering of my heart. I'll need to verify the detonation parameters. Of course, Major. The technical officer will provide whatever you require. The weapon sat in its launch bay, compact for its destructive potential, its smooth casing belying what it contained. Lieutenant Garza, the technical officer, walked me through the specifications with professional detachment. He had no idea what we were actually destroying. None of them did. I'll need some time with the guidance systems, I said. Verification protocols require me to confirm target acquisition parameters independently. Garza nodded. Take what time you need, sir. Launch is scheduled for 0600 tomorrow. Once alone with the weapon systems, I worked quickly. The modifications were subtle, altering the detonation altitude from underground penetration to high atmosphere explosion. The change would create the expected visual signature and EMP pulse, but spare the island and its precious underground structure. The submarine's crew would never know the difference. They'd see only the flash and confirmation readings of a successful detonation. I transmitted the coded confirmation to Hobbs. Parameters adjusted. Proceed with shield preparation. 12 hours later, I stood on the observation deck of a military vessel positioned 30 miles from the disk. Through high-powered binoculars, I could see the perfect circle of the island, possibly for the last time, at least as far as the world would know. Beside me, Colonel Mann checked his watch. T-minus 10 minutes, Major. Your instruments calibrated? Yes, sir. The radiation sensors and electromagnetic field detectors arranged before me were genuine, but their readings would be manipulated by the machine's capabilities once Hobbs activated the protective field. Strange place, Mann commented, looking toward the distant island. Intelligence has no record of its existence before 3 years ago. Some of the higher-ups think it might be Chinese or Russian technology. I said nothing, maintaining the professional distance expected of me. Mann didn't need to know that what we were about to destroy was 50,000 years old, or that its loss would eventually destroy human civilization itself. 5 minutes to launch, came the announcement over the radio. I adjusted my dark glasses, necessary protection from the nuclear flash. The true test of our plan would come in these next moments. If it failed, humanity's consciousness was doomed. If it succeeded, I would never see freedom again. 3 minutes. I thought of my brother, of the letter I'd left in my safe explaining everything. Would he understand my choice? Would anyone? 1 minute. Recording equipment active, I reported, activating the systems that would document the destruction, or appear to. 30 seconds. I closed my eyes briefly, picturing Hobbs deep within the underground structure, her hands placed on the crystalline nodes that would command the machine to protect itself. Everything depended on timing now. Missile away. Through my binoculars, I tracked the faint trail of the missile as it arced through the clear morning sky, its trajectory perfect, but toward a detonation point thousands of feet higher than officially planned. The flash came first, brilliant even through protective lenses. Then the characteristic mushroom cloud formed in the high atmosphere, followed by the delayed sound of the explosion rolling across the water. The EMP pulse hit our ship as expected, temporarily disrupting electronics despite their shielding. Direct hit, Mann said with satisfaction, watching the distant cloud rise and spread. Sensors confirmed detonation. I checked my instruments, which showed exactly what we needed them to show. Radiation signatures consistent with the destruction of the island. Electromagnetic patterns suggesting complete obliteration of whatever lay beneath its surface. In reality, the machine below was generating a perfect mimicry of these readings while protecting itself from detection. Confirmation of target destruction, I reported, my voice steady despite everything at stake. Radiation patterns consistent with complete elimination of the anomalous structure. Mann nodded, seemingly relieved. Good. We'll maintain position for 48 hours for continued monitoring, then dispatch reconnaissance drones to confirm complete destruction. The next 2 days were the most stressful of my career. The drones would be the real test. They would need to see a destroyed island, not the intact disk. When they launched, I monitored their feeds with forced casualness, knowing that Hobbs and the machine were creating false imagery that would show a shattered crater where the disk had been. Imagery confirms complete destruction, the drone operator reported. The island structure has been eliminated. Nothing but disturbed water and debris remains. Man clapped me on the shoulder. Excellent work, Major. You'll remain on site for 6 months monitoring for any anomalous readings. Periodic supply drops will keep you equipped. Captain Rollins will stay to provide transport as needed. I managed a crisp salute. Understood, sir. 3 days later, I stood on the perfectly intact disk as the last military vessel disappeared over the horizon. Beside me, Hobbs emerged from the underground chamber, exhaustion clear on her face. It worked, she said simply. For now. I looked around at the unmarred surface of the disk. We've bought time, nothing more. She nodded. 6 months at least, maybe more if we're careful. Let's make them count. Our life on the island settled into a strange rhythm. Hobbs spent most of her time below with the machine, studying its operations, learning its language of symbols and energy patterns. I maintained the deception, sending false reports of radiation monitoring from a destroyed site, occasionally taking samples of seawater that would show exactly the contamination patterns expected from a nuclear strike. We were careful with the supply drops. Each time a drone delivered provisions, we'd activate the machine's field manipulation to show only devastation to its cameras. Captain Rollins became our unexpected ally. After witnessing the machine and understanding its importance, she agreed to help maintain our cover during her periodic flights to check on us. 4 months in, Hobbs made her first breakthrough. I've identified the power regulation system, she told me one evening as we ate a sparse dinner of military rations. The caretakers designed it to draw energy from quantum fluctuations, essentially tapping into zero-point energy from multiple dimensions. Can it be repowered? She pushed her glasses up, a gesture I'd come to recognize as her thinking deeply. Possibly. There's a dormant section that seems to be designed as a backup system. If I can activate it, we might be able to extend the operational lifespan by decades, maybe centuries. That would give humanity more time to evolve naturally. Exactly. She smiled, a rare expression on her usually intense face. We just need more time. We were almost at the 5-month mark when Hobbs had me help her move a crystalline component to a previously unexplored section of the underground complex. The piece was surprisingly light for its size, yet it hummed with energy that made my skin tingle. Be careful, she cautioned as we navigated a narrow passage. This component contains encoded information about consciousness stabilization. It's irreplaceable. The work was painstaking but gave us purpose. We were the only 2 people on Earth who understood what we were preserving and what would happen if we failed. It created a bond beyond ordinary human connection. We weren't just colleagues or even friends. We were caretakers now, like those who had built this place millennia ago. Then came the day everything changed. I was on the surface, adjusting our communications equipment to maintain the false readings, when Captain Rollins made an unscheduled landing. She exited her aircraft with unusual urgency. They know, she said without preamble. A weather satellite picked up thermal signatures last night when the machine was cycling. They're sending a team. My blood ran cold. When? 24 hours, maybe less. Special forces, full tactical gear. I looked toward the entrance to the underground chamber. We need to warn Hobbs, prepare the machine's defenses. Rollins nodded grimly. I'll delay them as much as I can. Report equipment malfunctions that require additional passes. She hesitated. Chen, you know what this means. Yes, I met her eyes. Thank you, Captain. I found Hobbs deep within the complex, working at the console that interfaced with the machine's core functions. When I told her about the imminent incursion, she didn't panic as I expected. Instead, a calm determination settled over her. We knew this might happen, she said, hands moving decisively across crystalline interfaces. I've been preparing a contingency. Help me with this final connection. For the next 20 hours, we worked without rest, Hobbs directing me to move components, adjust configurations, and prepare the machine for what might be our final act as its protectors. She explained that she was activating the dormant backup system, the one that might extend the machine's operational lifespan. Even if they capture us, she said, the machine will continue functioning. That's what matters. The Special Forces team arrived at dawn, rappelling from helicopters onto the disk's surface with military precision. Captain Rawlins had bought us as much time as she could, but the end had come. 12 operators in full tactical gear, weapons ready, converged on the entrance to the underground chamber. We heard them before we saw them, boots on the spiral staircase, tactical communications echoing off the perfect walls. Hobbs worked frantically at the console, finalizing the activation sequence. "It's done," she whispered as the first operator appeared in the chamber entrance, weapon trained on us. "David Chen, Victoria Hobbs," a voice called through a tactical mask. "You are under arrest for treason against the United States. Stand down immediately." I raised my hand slowly, moving to position myself between Hobbs and the operators. "No resistance," I said clearly. "We surrender." The next hours passed in a blur. Restraints, separate transports, the bright sunlight of the disk giving way to the artificial lighting of military aircraft. I caught one last glimpse of Hobbs as they led her to a different helicopter, her eyes meeting mine with a message I understood perfectly. It's safe. We succeeded. My military tribunal was a formality. The evidence against me was overwhelming. Falsified reports, tampered nuclear weapons, deliberate deception of the highest order. Colonel Mann testified personally, his face a mask of controlled fury as he detailed my betrayal. I offered no defense except one statement. I acted to preserve what I believed was necessary for humanity's survival. The verdict was unanimous, guilty of treason, sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. As they led me from the courtroom in chains, I saw my brother Percy in the gallery, his face a mixture of confusion and grief. I hoped someday he would read my letter and understand. They interrogated me for months about the machine, its location within the complex, its vulnerable points, how to access its core systems. I revealed nothing. Eventually they gave up, transferring me to this military prison where I have remained for the past year, writing this account. Dr. Hobbs disappeared into some classified research facility. I heard rumors from guards that she was being forced to help the military understand the machine, though I doubted she would cooperate any more than I had. The machine itself, I believed, remained operational, its guardian systems activated, its consciousness field still stabilizing humanity across the planet. Hobbs had succeeded in activating the dormant backup system before our capture. The machine would continue its work for decades more, perhaps long enough for humanity to evolve the stability it needed naturally. Sometimes at night, I close my eyes and remember the visions the machine showed me, the countless human lives, struggles, triumphs, and potential. I remember the perfect disk on the ocean surface, the impossible geometry of the pyramid below, the crystalline components that hummed with energy from dimensions beyond our understanding. I have lost my freedom, my career, everything I once valued. Yet I find peace knowing that human consciousness continues, protected by technology 50,000 years old, created by beings who saw something worth preserving in our primitive ancestors. Somewhere, the caretakers are watching. Somewhere, the machine continues its silent work. And humanity, unaware of how close it came to losing itself, moves forward with the gift of conscious thought. That, in the end, is worth any price I've paid.